All right, guys, so I'm back with another video. Today is going to be another kind of fun video, a super interesting video I think you guys will find, and probably something you're not really going to find very many other places, and that is going to be the similarities and differences between a Vietnam-era Green Beret and the Global War and Terror GWOT Green Beret, okay? So why am I positioned to be able to talk about this? Well, for those of you who are new to the channel or don't already know me, I am a very, very rare second generation Green Beret. Okay, so my dad was a Green Beret. He served during the Vietnam era and fought in the war as a Green Beret. And then I obviously did in the Global War on Terror. So I'm in a position that's very unique, and then I have access to all the stories and information, everything from not only my dad, but a bunch of his era friends from MACV-SOG, Mike Forces, close friends in all those units. So I have a very good understanding, and we talk about this, me and my dad together all the time, similarities and differences. So I thought it'd be a cool video to do for you guys. Okay. With that, don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. I guess there's a notification bell you guys can hit so you can see my posts. Why not hit that, right? So helps the channel out a lot. All right, let's get right into it. So I want to start out sort of at the beginning. Okay, so we'll talk about the Special Forces Qualification Course. What sort of is the differences between the two? Okay, so in the Vietnam era, for one, right out the gate, the course was much, much shorter. Okay, it was only 6 months long most of the time if you true blued your way through. Okay, selection itself was also much different. It was much more of a team event that looked a lot more like SUT does now. Okay, like they actually went out on patrols, set up ambushes. They did the STAR course, but the STAR course was done like as a whole squad. Okay, it wasn't done as an individual thing like we do now. So, and I believe it was only 2 weeks from what my dad said when he went through. So, and that's selection. So the Q course was primarily MOS school. Okay, for these guys. A big part of the reason why it was so short, keep in mind during that era, is the Vietnam War is raging on, and a lot of Green Berets are dying in that war. Okay, it was a much more death toll heavy conflict than the Global War on Terror for a lot of different reasons, mostly medical intervention wise. But they had to churn out guys quickly to get them in country to continue to fight the war. So a lot different, or a little bit different. A lot of it's still kind of the same. We in the Special Forces Qualification Course today in squad unit tactics, it's all Vietnam era sort of tactics based. Okay, that's where unconventional warfare really comes from. In the Special Forces sort of training capacity, that's where it comes from. So that's where there is still a lot of similarities in the actual training. But okay, next let's talk about actual ODAs, what life was like on an ODA. And how they were actually structured. Okay, the structure is still pretty much the same, but what was much different, so in Global War on Terror, the way ODAs worked is typically you would go to an ODA and you would probably be on that same ODA, unless something crazy happened or you get kicked off or whatever, but for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Okay, I spent 3.5 years on one of mine, 2 years on another, and another 3 on a different ODA. Okay, whereas in Vietnam era, guys bounced around all over the place, right? So let's say one of the camps had no 18 Charlies left. You might have an 18 Charlie just pulled right off your team, sent to a different camp on a different team. And guys really didn't have that sort of unique long-term team feel. I think that's one of the things the Vietnam era guys appreciate about the way the regiment has gone and the ODA has gone, is that we've sort of turned it into this long-time team where 12 guys can be together for years on end and just become incredibly tactically efficient on working together. Okay, so a little bit different in how the ODAs actually worked and how you might end up on an ODA or switching groups. Also, if you talk to guys in that era, and I know 20 plus of them from the Vietnam era, when they talk about what groups they were in, when they introduce themselves, I spent time in the 1st and the 5th and the 7th and 46th Company. A lot of these guys were in 3, 4, 5 different groups in their careers, whereas in our era, like, it's very rare that you spend time in a separate group than what you're in. I did my entire career in first group. Most guys are the exact same way, so that was very different. Yeah, let's get into the war and how it was fought itself, because I think that's what you guys are probably most interested in, right? So in Vietnam, you had a few different SF units, okay? We're not going to get into a history lesson here, but you had what's called was the A camps, right? So ODA camps, but A camps, which were camp outposts that ODAs would run operations out of, okay? Very similar to how VSO used to be earlier in the war for us in Afghanistan, okay, where we actually lived out in the villages, lived with the villagers, developed a fighting force, things like that, okay? So those are actually very similar in that regard. However, as we had VSO shut down and we gave the country back to the Taliban by Obama, thanks for doing that, by the way, then we started basically being sort of sectored to big bases and then operating out of those, which is much different than the way Vietnam was fought. Obviously, Vietnam was a very unconventional style war for the Green Berets, right? So their frequency of operations, okay, what you guys might be surprised because you hear about MAC-VSOG and Mike Forces, all these guys taking insane casualty rates, 80% casualty rates, things like that. They actually didn't go out on nearly as many missions in the frequency that we typically did in the global war on terror, right? For us, we'd go out every 5-6 days to a new mission, new target, new mission, new target. Those guys would go out, maybe once or twice a month at most. Now, individually, there might be more action at some than others, but on average, even the MAC-VSOG guys I know, were actually very surprised to hear how often we were going outside the wire, okay? So now, obviously, they took way higher casualty rate from what they were doing, but they're actually operating at a much less frequency. Also, the biggest difference, guys, by far in the combat itself, is that in Vietnam, the Viet Cong, the VC, owned nighttime, okay? The SF guys operated during the day. That's when they would go out, because you didn't want to fight the VC at night on their own turf, okay? Move that to global war on terror with us. Now, obviously, there is some daytime fighting, but we really leverage fighting at night due to night vision, right? Aircraft, all these different things that gave us a massive advantage over the Taliban and ISIS at nighttime, okay? Huge difference back and forth. Obviously, it's jungle warfare. Their combat was all very, very close. For example, my dad was 18 Charlie. His primary weapon that he carried was a shotgun, right? So you can imagine how close the confrontations these were constantly getting in. Whereas for us, granted, I was in a near ambush. I have fought from a distance of right in front of my face. That happens too. But for the most part, the vast majority of the time, our gunfights are spread out, over multiple compounds and, distances of hundreds of meters sometimes, right? So very different in the way combat was held to in the jungle versus the desert. You can imagine the differences that come into that, right? Also the operator themselves differences, okay? If you look at pictures of my dad in their era, they're all super, tall, super fit, but like 150, 160 pounds, okay? A lot of that's due to the jungle. Like my dad said, he went in to Vietnam 190 pounds, came out 150 pounds. The heat, sweat, right? Everything that has to do with the jungle. So what that meant is those guys didn't wear body armor. Those guys didn't wear helmets. Those guys didn't carry nearly as much gear as we did, right? They carried the essentials, food, water, ammunition, radios, and, a few things here and there where we carried, upwards of 130, 140 pounds on my body when I would go out, okay, with body armor and helmet and all these different things that I'm carrying. So much, much different in what the operator actually looked like, okay? But, the cool thing is, the one thing that remains the same, and I can say this because I know 50 guys in the community from Vietnam till now, spread out through all of those eras. So there's really a common thread that sort of runs through all of the SF operators, Green Berets, right? It's hard to pinpoint down what exactly it is, but we can all feel it, right? you definitely can, you know another Green Beret when you meet one. So that, the sort of the personality, the ambition, drive, motivation, discipline, all that stuff has continued from Vietnam all the way until today. Okay, so one quick thing at the end, what did the end of the war look like, right? Because interestingly enough, my dad fought all the way till 73. And when Vietnam actually ended, much like I fought all the way until Afghanistan ended, okay? All the things I'm complaining about, I did a video about it, what's happened to the regiment. He talks about the exact same things going into peacetime army, right? A bunch of dumb stuff they're doing. Yeah, you can watch that video for that, but very similar in that. As war ends, so does sort of the role of the Green Beret in a lot of ways, unfortunately. But I hope you guys found that video interesting. So what I'm thinking about doing, I finally got him to agree, is do sort of a sit down, just conversation style with me and my dad. So you'll have two generations of Green Beret talking about, you know, right out of his mouth how it was in Vietnam, and then comparing to what I have, and, you know, sit down for maybe an hour, drink some whiskey, talk like we usually do, and you guys can sort of get a better understanding of what those multiple generations of SF actually look like. All right, guys, take care.